Okay, we are live. The talk is back. It's not Thursday, it's Wednesday, but that's okay. We're here to try new things. That's what makes life fun. I have been having a lot of trouble speaking lately, and I don't know why. Anyway, welcome to the talk, everybody. My name is Emiko, and my co-host here is Brian Mitchell, who is the publisher and CEO and founder of eCoustics.com. And we are joined tonight with a very, very, very special guest, somebody that I have been admittedly fangirling over his work for quite a while. So I'm super excited that he's not only on the talk, but he's coming to the show. But before I introduce everybody, couple of house rules. You know that if you have seen the talk before, if you're a regular, this is a safe space for people to talk about all things hi-fi, audio, music, lifestyle. There's no harassment. There's no bullying. There's certainly no sexual harassment. Goodness knows, why would there be? And there are no stupid questions. We have a lot of people who are on this journey of hi-fi and audio, and they're coming at all different entry points. So if somebody asks a question that seems rather elementary to you, it's not your open door and green light to go bash them. It's your open door to educate and encourage, share some points of view, share some options with them, information. That's what we're all here to do. We're here to learn, encourage, and inspire one another. So speaking of which, André Darlington, critically acclaimed author of Booze and Vinyl Volumes 1 and 2, The New Cocktail Hour, TCM's movie night menus. And in addition, he has published a couple books of poetry. These books that he's written, he's going to be, what? I dug deep. I dug deep. He's going to be at the show in Long Beach, June 10th through 12th with us. He's going to be doing two very special, we're calling them mixology sessions because that's the pun, where he's going to be sitting down, talking about the book, talking about the cocktails. We're going to be having some signature cocktails and just enjoying time together. And so we thought what would be fun is to bring him on for a pre-interview before he's in the actual hot seat in person. Welcome to the talk, André Darlington.
Thank you so much for having me on. Super excited to be here.
I am thrilled. I just want to say that funnily enough, the way that you and I connected through Instagram was because a contributor to eCoustics, it was Eric Pye.
Oh, wow.
That posted something about booze and vinyl. He had just posted something about booze and vinyl.
He has a whiskey Instagram, something like Whiskey YYC.
Yes, Whiskey Love YYC.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow.
Right. So this whole thing is like, it's been brewing, haha, no pun intended, in the background. And and then I started hounding you on Instagram.
I was at a record shopping in, I think, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. And I saw your Instagram and I wanted to sit down with a beer anyway. So I was like, who's this person? So yes. And I remember you saying like, oh, I didn't ever think you'd actually reply to me. And I'm like, no, I replied to everybody.
I didn't think you would reply because you really are in many, many worlds and in many, many corners of the world. You are a very well-respected and well sought after person for your work, for your perspective, for your point of view. And I just assumed that I was going to get thank you for contacting Team André. How can we help you? Right? Like I thought I was going to get one of those and I didn't. And I went, yes.
If you're a really terrible liquor brand, maybe. But if you're a hi-fi nerd, the likelihood of me responding goes way up.
Fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough. So let's talk about hi-fi nerd, because I know Brian and I were just discussing with you before we started the show that you grew up in a hi-fi family. Your father was an audiophile. The big thing was the Thorin's turntable. Read about the lights, sort of like the car glowing in the dark, right? So take us through what that was like growing up in a house that was just filled with music all the time.
Yeah, my father was a classical violinist in an unlikely scenario. And we grew up, with musicians in the house, him teaching lessons in the house all the time. And then he was sort of one of those 60s DIY hi-fi guys on top of that. I'm not sure there's that many sort of like musician meets, near engineer types out there, but he had built his own Dynaco system. He had his, the credenza that it was all in, had been hand built in upstate New York, that kind of thing. And growing up with it, it's just sort of like, yeah, that's, the hi-fi system. And then, as you get into high school, you start to realize like, no, this is odd. This is at the end of a spectrum. People don't have this at home.
Not many people have these systems.
Yeah, right. And especially at that time, when it was kind of going away. So I grew up with this, Thorne's turntable, which was sort of the hearth of the home, which was really kind of, to take it to the book, the book's Booze and Vinyl. I'm a musician as well. But, going and, then went into food and beverage and started writing about cocktails and all this, but was able to sort of bring this like kind of childhood experience forward, for a new vinyl era. I mean, to fast forward a little bit, my dad was a huge hi-fier. He did go like fully CD as well. So we went through the entire thing.
He crossed over to the digital side.
Digital world.
The digital side. We're talking laser, operas on laser discs.
Oh my
we had
gosh.
to, we had to have it all. I think a lot of people did, but he still, he still has the vinyl. He doesn't listen to it as much. Now we kind of argue about it a little bit because, he's much more of like a solid state guy. And I'm like, I don't know, tubes are pretty good for jazz. So, but it's, these are good arguments to have, and it's certainly, I think, one of the things that I like about, the hi-fi experience is that I'm also in the experience business. I was in the experience business when I owned a restaurant and had served cocktails. And I think cocktails are an experience. And I think one of the things that struck a chord with people is that vinyl is an experience, but really you can have that musical experience. The vinyl versus the digital is, I think, almost less important than having these great musical experiences. And the other thing that I like about the hi-fi community is they're, still some of the last people crying out about quality, and the sound should be good, So I think with Booze and Vinyl, it's twofold. One, I really like the experience that an artist takes you through in vinyl, so you can't skip ahead. We all went into the digital earbuds. We can barely even remember what musician we're listening to anymore. And there's something to be said for the convenience. You're on an airplane, you're traveling, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I think my book is, has struck a chord because it is this like deeply experiential thing, analog on top of it. But it's really the experience.
Well, I want to read a little bit from your book. I just want to show it here. Well, I'm going to try to show it here. Yeah. I have a green screen going on because I'm not in front of my system, so I just have a picture of my system behind me. Because what's behind me in real life is not.
I'm going to try that next time.
It's not worth looking at. But anyway, this is such a beautiful thing. First of all, you have a quote in here from Jack White of the White Stripes. It says, "Vinyl is the real deal. I've always felt like if you don't buy the vinyl record, you don't."
Uh-oh. I think Emiko froze up. Hopefully she'll come back quickly. I think I know where that quote was going. Do you remember?
Yeah, it's like something about if you don't have, if you're not on vinyl, it's not the real deal.
Right.
And I do agree with that. There's, there's a, certainly growing up, I was sort of in that transition phase from right. vinyl into the 90s. And, the idea that the art could drop out of it, it was
right.
really tactile. I think the generation these days forget that, right. Those of us in the distant past, we couldn't access this music unless somebody bought it
right.
went down to the mall, went to a store and shopped for it. So I remember very vividly somebody getting a vinyl, a record that we all wanted to listen to and going over to their house. And having all sit around and listen to it and have a listening party, whether you wanted to or not. That was the only way you were going to hear the new album.
Right. I mean, that was how you experienced music in the past, and you're trying to remind people that's the way you can experience music now. Like, you don't have to be in this short-term playlist type of earbud experience. Like, you can slow down, you can have a drink, you can enjoy the music, you can enjoy the drink at the same time. But my question is, are you drinking to enjoy the music, or are you enjoying the music to enjoy the drinks?
I think they sort of mutually benefit each other. I certainly didn't come up with the idea that drinking and music go together. I just put a particular spin on it, I think. But the thing that's interesting is that I think a lot of people's love of cocktails comes from the idea that you're not drinking to get drunk, you're drinking to have some kind of great sort of elevated and delicious sort of treat for yourself.
Right.
But the cocktails also all tell a story.
Yep.
We're paying attention to quality ingredients, blah blah blah. And where I'm going with that is that you're not drinking to get drunk. You're also just not listening for the sake of listening when you're listening to vinyl, So they're both experiences where you're like, yeah, you could just be having, vodka and earbuds, but instead you're enjoying this like nice cocktail and vinyl. And so there's a sort of depth to it. And it was funny because, I wrote a couple cocktail books before this one, and this sort of grew organically out of the fact that I was working and recipe testing other books, and it was like, all right, she's back.
It goes back.
So we were organically testing other books and realized, oh geez, a side of a record is a really nice length to enjoy a good well-made drink. And they do kind of and the books sort of pair the mood, an attempt to pair the mood, or to actually heighten the experience. For instance, there's something as simple as like a Manhattan Goes with Frank Sinatra, kind of obvious, but there's really fun stuff in there too, where I do quite a bit of research when I get the books going. So it's a lot of research into what the artists themselves like to drink. So for instance, for like Blondie, I went back and found the original cocktail menu for Max's Kansas City in New York, and there was a Blondie cocktail on there. I don't always get that lucky, but in that one, it was like, oh, that's the pairing. And it turns out it's what they were serving is what we kind of know as a Cadillac, which was a delicious cream drink that was pretty popular in the 60s anyway, and happened to be blonde in color. So that one wrote itself. But yeah, I think they kind of mutually do. I think even growing up back in the days, I certainly remember people just pouring themselves a nice glass of scotch with an ice cube, right, and putting on your album. And this is sort of an updated version of that in a way.
Right.
I wanted to ask a question, and I don't know what we've talked about so far because I went through the portal to Narnia just now.
We were just going over just a little bit about music and booze together.
That's probably going to be my dinner tonight. I'm just saying. Well, the thing that's really the thing that resonated with me, Andre, about not just about your books, but as I delved into where you come from and how you sort of took this journey, was there's a real social aspect to these books. There's a real social aspect, not just to the books, but to the message of what you're conveying. And I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a boozy listening party, this idea of why it's so important to exchange. I know you say it in volume 1, exchange vinyl with friends and sort of sit down together and listen, and what that experience is. And how do you feel that the social aspect plays such a vital role, and what can we do, especially like coming out of, we're still in like semi-pandemic, endemic mode. What can we do to bring that social aspect back to it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that there's something inherent a little bit in analog, and well, one, there's something in interest groups, right? And I think at a basic level, music and bands and what they bring out in us, that kind of fandom. We all remember going to shows, and it kind of develops a community out of the type of music that you like, but also just the experience of listening to an album all together with other people, I think has become, I think it's coming back because you go into stores like Urban Outfitters and Target. Right. Even when I wrote the first book in 2016, vinyl hadn't quite come back to the extent that it seems to have even this year. And in fact, 2020 was the first year that vinyl surpassed CD sales since the 90s. So we're at some sort of a watershed there. But I do think that there was a group of people that never stopped. But I do think there's a large generation of people that we're bringing back to the idea, like, maybe the only time you ever listened to an album together was sitting around the Christmas tree, right, with your family. Maybe you put on something at that point. But a lot of people have never listened to a full album with other people, which is kind of, I think, shocking for our generation, maybe, that, you know, I was just telling Brian that, you know, back in the day, if you wanted to listen to a song, unless you waited for the radio and quick taped it, you had to go over to a friend's house, whether you liked it or not,
Right.
and hope that they had gotten their, you know, gotten some money from their parents to go to the mall and buy an album, so you could all obsessively listen to the new whatever, U2 or, you know, going back whatever album. So there's a sense that back in the day you had to do this, but I think there was definitely, I mean, the book became wildly popular during the pandemic, and I think that speaks to a lot of just like the healing power of music, right? The idea that the book is about albums, and people can go into an album for an hour or more and sort of lose themselves, but they can also do it together. I don't know, it's something like, you know, going hiking with friends. You can go hiking by yourself, which is pretty great and relaxing. But if you listen to an album with friends or go hiking with friends, that's fun too. And you can kind of go together for the ride. And I guess that's what the book is kind of about. You know, you can do this by yourself, but you can do it with love. You know, a lot of people were just coupled up during the pandemic, and it's still fun to go through music. You can also now, you know, invite a small group of people over. And I do think it just helps build community, and a community around shared interest and art ultimately.
Right.
I love that. I love it also because it's funny. Fred Faison says, I hope, Fred, I'm pronouncing your last name right, having to get up every 23 minutes to turn it over. And yes, that's true. But I have to tell you, just from like my personal experience, I'll sit down with a good martini and spin some tunes. And if I don't get up, two things happen. First, I ruin my album. But second of all, I keep drinking. So standing up is my intermittent cardio. Like walk over, turn it over, come back. You know, it's a nice intermission, I think. But yes, getting up to turn it over is important for sure.
Yeah, there's that moment. You know, I find myself listening to vinyl, especially when I'm recipe testing. I'm, you know, in the, you know, it's not, vinyl's not ideal when you're like wrist deep marinating chicken. You know, okay, forgot about that part. That's when you want your to be like, next song, please.
Right.
But I do think there's something about vinyl in particular that's irreplaceable. Or, you know, just sitting down. Really, the basics is sitting down to a decent stereo and listening to an album all the way through.
Right.
Is the basics. And I think, you know, doing that with friends. You know, I've had some incredible conversations with people where I'll put on an album, or they'll come over and go through my music, and I'll find out that they have really deep connections with certain albums that I never really knew why. Or I think so many people have deep connections with albums, whether they were good times in life or bad times in life. You know, so many albums like breakup albums for people, or this was happening in their lives. And you can find out a lot about people, not just by their music choices, of course, but why, you know, why the music choices that they make.
Right. Right. Do you find this is something that I have found really bizarre? I gave my best girlfriend a record player for Christmas last year or the year before. I can't remember. A Crosley, as a matter of fact, since you and I were talking about that. Yeah, a Voyager, because she's not an audiophile. She's sort of like, oh, I want to get back into vinyl. I don't really have the room for. I said, I got a spare something. I'll just, you know, whatever. I'll give it to you. It's all good. And I bought her a pair of speakers. And she made the comment to me. She said, do you realize that we've known each other for almost 20 years and we have never sat down to listen to music together?
Wow.
Ever.
Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh, you're right. And we've been through everything: marriage, death, divorce. I mean, childbirth, you name it, we've done it. But then she said, what's really weird is now that I'm sitting in front of your system, which, you know, she said, I don't want to talk while the music's on.
Right.
Because for whatever reason, have you found that, especially in your travels and meeting people, vinyl is a much more focused listening experience than, say, digital streaming, where for me, it seems like digital streaming can be a little bit more background music, but because vinyl has that experience attached to it, like people want to sit and focus as opposed to sort of get up and wander around.
I think you're right. I think it does tend to shut you up. I mean, it depends on the album.
Fair.
But you know what? I think, but what's interesting is that anecdotally, as you have a few cocktails, sometimes it starts to party, but sometimes music gets heavier and heavier because people go further and further back into memory, or they want to. I think there is a natural human thing to kind of gravitate towards like quality or something primal. So I do find it pretty interesting that you can start out, playing bubblegum pop, and you're gonna end up on like Nick Lowe, like an hour and a half later. You know what I mean? Or choose any kind of, you'll end up on Johnny Cash, or something good. Joni Mitchell, or some of these great albums that they can even be albums that people don't necessarily admit to, that is kind of their go-to place, but it's like, oh wow, okay, we're gonna put that on now. It just happens. I do think there's a part of vinyl like that too, but there's also sort of dance around in her pajamas vinyl parties too. But I think we may have just aged out of that.
Well, I'm fascinated how you make listening to music fun. And I think that's maybe part of the key element of your books, is that you create this social experience that, like I was just listening to Emiko say, I can't remember the last time I sat down with a friend and listened to music. And that's like a really important thing. And your book kind of gives you that opportunity. Here's a guide, here's a pairing that goes well together. And was that the beginning of the inspiration when you did your first book? Like, what were you thinking when the first book came out?
Yeah, it really kind of was. It was like, I'd been in this F&B world, but I'd also been a musician, and sort of combining those two kind of analog experiences. It was like the idea that, these cocktails are sort of these like craft things that are interesting. You take your time with them. They can be works of, certainly, I don't know if they're works of art, but they're certainly, like a well-made meal, right? In a glass. And then you're pairing it with this thing that's tactile and like, pretty deeply emotional too. I love about records that you open them up and the art falls out, and you sort of enter this whole world with them, and they're also this tactile experience. So it was kind of the idea of sticking these two amazing tactile experiences together. But yeah, I mean, if the books work in any way as like permission for people to call up their besties and like hang out and have a good time, and who knows what it can lead to, I think it, obviously in this moment, incredibly healing experience, but can also just be fun too, but yeah, that was definitely basically it. The books, I wanted multiple points of entry into the books. So it's like, if you're into hip hop, we got you. If you're into country, we've got you. I wanted a lot of different types of people to be able to pick it up, and different generations to want to pick it up. Obviously the cradle of great vinyl is, late 50s, 70s, probably really the heart, dropping off by the 80s and 90s, and then this huge resurgence. But there is music for all ages, especially the new book really goes up until almost last year in the albums. And I think the first one goes up to like pretty much the year that it came out too, which would be like 2016, 2017, something like that. So trying to be contemporary, although people agree less, of course, on what's a classic the closer we get in time. So I always have to be very, very careful there, because I do want to make sure that these are sort of like, the albums have a timeless quality that are going to hold up. But yeah, I mean, the idea was really twofold, to sort of be like, if you're getting into vinyl, if you follow these books, you may not love them all, but you're going to have a great vinyl collection. You're going to at least have heard these albums that are really important and why. And at the same time, you'll have a pretty good cocktail education. And, that was the hope. There was sort of like, it can be babies, music appreciation and cocktail appreciation 101 stuck into together with a good time. So
I asked this question of a lot of people, but I'm really curious to know what you have to say, because you do come from the music world, the F&B world, lifestyle in general, and the idea of experience as being important. Why do you think, I was going to ask you, why do you think ceremony is important when it comes to mixology and vinyl? But table that, I want to ask you, why do you think HiFi is important?
Well, hi-fi I think is important because we've seen such a degradation of experience over certainly my lifetime, I think, in all kinds of ways. And I think, being a musician and growing up in a musical family, it's one of the clearest things that has degraded as an experience is music, over recorded form. I mean, there's still live shows.
Right.
Although we can argue that those aren't quite as great anymore with the consolidation of that industry either.
Sure.
But that's sort of another thing. But certainly recorded music has experienced sort of a degradation in experience. It's been convenience over quality. And I think coming from the cocktail world, the 80s and 90s were exactly the same thing, which was convenience over quality. All the restaurants had ice machines that made ice very quickly and took up a lot of volume and watered down your drink and made for a terrible drink. No one wanted to juice lemons and limes anymore, and they used sour mix. And you can kind of, I mean, the parallel is strained a little bit, but it's still similar in that we chose to go with this incredible technology. Really, right? The iPod was an incredible revolution. Before that, of course, we had Sony Walkman and all that. So it's been a long time coming. But I do think that with streaming, the accessibility is, of course, incredible. And of course, the mobility and convenience is incredible. And at the same time, we have to be really careful that we don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Forget that these are artists behind there who are not getting paid anymore. And also that we're kind of losing something about the musical experience of sitting at home, sort of in the dark, listening to music that really was made so well in the beginning that you want to listen to it on a hi-fi system. It is kind of incredible because I'd gone pretty far down the road, as I think we all have, with earbuds. And certainly writing the book, starting in sort of the one that came out in 2018, sort of starting in 2016, 2017, going back to a hi-fi system and being like, wow, this was so bad that I never even knew that bass line was there anymore.
Right.
In that song. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, the earbuds, it's not quite as the difference between black and white and color, but I tell everybody, you should listen to your favorite music once or twice on, CDs fine too, but on a decent system to remind yourself that, wow, these recordings are pretty powerful on a hi-fi system. I mean, a good example in the new book is I had heard Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger, of course, but I'd actually never owned it on vinyl, and I stuck it on vinyl and sat down, old school, to listen to a hi-fi system. And Willie Nelson is sitting right with you behind those speakers, and it's pretty. It's chilling, right? You get this a musical experience that's really incredible because you can feel sort of the directionality of the mics, and it's just really incredibly live. So I mean, I think that's something fun. But again, you're talking to a kid who kind of knew that experience because my dad dragged me to a lot of hi-fi stores, to listen to stuff. But even I had forgotten it. So it's something I think we need to keep relearning in a way.
Is that to me sort of speaks to the layers of experience, like you're talking about when you put something on vinyl, you hear things that perhaps you didn't hear before, but couldn't the same, I drink a fair amount, Brian knows this. Couldn't the same be said about cocktails? It's about the layers of the flavor and what comes out and how it finishes and the intricacies of what goes in there versus I'm going to chug a beer or I'm going to drink a shot, and the purpose of said shot or beer is to get drunk or to get numb or to get whatever, conveniently relaxed. This is more of a peeling back the layers of the onion type of a thing.
Yeah, I absolutely. And, the cocktail has the added thing, especially in a bar, is a little bit of pageantry. I mean, I would argue that, if you take two martinis, both with the same ingredients, and one sort of thrown together, and another one presented to you by a professional, stirred at the right temperature in a glass under beautiful lighting, it just tastes different.
Sure.
And I think a lot of, people have reduced, I think it's certainly that has happened in music where it was like, oh, these are just digital signals. It's all the same, right? Well, we know that it's not. It's different if you're listening to a little vinyl on like a Crosley turntable in a hotel room on the road with, the highway noise going by, or if you're listening to, noise canceling headphones, somewhere, or you're listening to a hi-fi system. So it's just like not the same. So I think there is a lot of that. And again, I think that goes back to experience, right? It's just what type of experience you're looking for. And I think people are really looking for depth again.
Now, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, it sounds like you had a lot of fun researching this book, because you got to do a lot of drinking, a lot of listening to music, a lot of sampling, and somewhere things had to match up. But I'm sure there was a lot of things that were like, this doesn't work. And you probably threw the glass against the wall and like, this will never happen.
Yeah, the books are, they're burners. It's never as much fun behind the scenes as you might hope. But, it's 70 albums. So, yes, there's 140 cocktails in this one. The first one, I had a lot in my arsenal of cocktails that I knew from writing the other books that I'd sort of left on the cutting room floor, or just a pretty good knowledge of American cocktail history. And I kind of had a really good idea of where things were going. With this new one, I did a lot more cocktail creation, and it's 4 years later. I wrote a couple other books where I've been a longtime cocktail journalist, and my approach was sort of like, who am I to come up with these drinks? There's plenty of professionals to choose from. But this time I did sort of do riffs and quite a few originals in here. And it is fun. I have a friend, but also professional recipe developer who, we spend probably 4 or 5 days recipe testing. And, there's a lot of good drinks. There's a lot of great drinks in the book. Every once in a while, there's a real star, and it will go into the fridge and we'll drink it later. But sadly, there's quite a bit of just dumping through ingredients to get there. When I first started out writing cocktail books, it was much more the approach of like, I got a cocktail book deal. Everyone come over and I'll recipe test. And I learned really quickly how poorly that goes. Unless you can keep all of your friends in another room and sort of send the cocktails out through pneumatic tube, your house just basically turns into a huge party. No notes have been taken. You can't really remember what was good and what wasn't. So unfortunately, it's a pretty controlled environment. But sometimes there are, a few folks around who will stop over after the session's sort of done. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. One of the things that's been a true joy is just the creative process of the books. I sort of write the script for the books, but the books, as you've seen, are beautiful, which are, entirely due to an incredible team out of Philadelphia, who actually, I was lucky enough that did both of them. Just incredible graphic design on the book. Obsessive, vinyl people and music heads can be obsessive, and the graphic designer and the photographer are music obsessives anyway. So I think they bring a real passion to this. For instance, the cover of the book, those are the albums in the book. That's an insane level of, we got all of the albums in the book, line them up, photograph them, insane levels of detail. Things that I didn't know, like some bands have their own fonts. And the graphic designer, hunted down the fonts that are on their albums, and those are the fonts in the book. Just intense stuff. And I love that level of, again, sort of depth of the artwork in the book too.
I'd love to know, the book is primarily, there's the Stones are in here. There's a few other, Radiohead, there's a few others. Primarily, it seems like it's American / some Canadians that cross the border. But I'm Japanese, and jazz vinyl and jazz satang are huge things in Japanese lifestyle. And I spent a fair amount of time in England and in Germany, and I'd love to know how the book is received overseas, and if you've encountered folks that either their mixology is different or their vinyl listening habits are different, and what sort of feedback you've gotten internationally.
It's been pretty interesting. Internationally, it goes out. The publishing industry is such that here it definitely goes to Canada, and Canadian partners there. Both of the books were picked up really pretty quickly by the BBC, and I do interviews with BBC, but also like BBC affiliate stations around the world, especially Southern Europe, where I think there's a lot of British expats. And still some really great, I guess, disc jockeys still going, old school style. The Brits maybe have kept a little bit more of that going than even the Americans have. The reception has been pretty great, actually. I would love to go to Tokyo since this, and kind of see what's going on, see what the reaction is. Funny enough, I've made good contacts with DJs over in Asia, and we've been talking recently about maybe doing a booze and vinyl tour through a few Asian cities.
Nice.
There's a few hotels that have taken vinyl pretty seriously. For instance, there's a hotel called Lennon's in Bangkok, where the top floor of the Rosewood Hotel is basically a really glamorous, incredible DJ booth. That you can, it's like a bar that's doubles as a DJ booth, and doing events there would be incredible. And we've definitely talked about it. There's a smattering of foreign artists in here. There might be more in the second one. There's the Buena Vista social clubs. There's some of the albums that have just been these like global watersheds that you can't ignore. The Gypsy Kings are in the new one. Which was really fun. And that one has been fun because on the road, so many people, anecdotally, I've been on the road for the last 3 or 4 weeks, so it's always fun for me to see what the reaction live is to the books. And everyone's like, wow, I'd forgotten how big that album was. Everyone owned the Gypsy Kings, So there's some fun. There's definitely a little bit of French pop in the new one as well. There's quite a few British artists, I would say. Pretty much most of the big British invasion folks are in. The Who is in the new one, of course. The Beatles were in the past one, but there's quite a bit of Brits in there too. And I guess that's
So what should we look forward to when we see you in person at the show?
I was just gonna ask that. Yes. Let's talk about that.
Booze and Vinyl Live.
Hey.
Yeah, I think we'll listen to a few tunes. It's been fun. On this tour, I got lucky enough to be supported by a few W Hotel locations. So we've had DJs that have been great, been DJing on vinyl, which is fantastic. But when I haven't had that, I usually, we'll have a few albums and listen to a few selections, and then hopefully drink a couple of cocktails that go with it. So it's a full experience. I always joke, I get so lucky because, I don't write about the Civil War or, I don't write about a rare genetic disease or, even like a self-help book and try and go on tour. I mean, the title of the book is Booze and Vinyl. So pretty much people just show up and I try to give them that. I really like to, the sessions have all been really fun. It's been pretty crazy this spring, doing pretty much sold out events. I think people are excited to be back. A lot of people, I think, have heard about the first one. But in a session like what we'll do, I think if people are sort of in an audience, going around, one of the things I love is getting a few anecdotes of what people's first albums were on vinyl. Always amazing, sometimes hilarious. Of what people gotten. And it really kind of turns into an audience participation thing a little bit, I think, where we get some good feedback and, some of people's, memories or interest in vinyl. So that's always fun. And then sort of a question and answer session for sure, but just a way to engage people in music. And in this case, cocktails, but the pairing could be anything in theory. But the cocktails go pretty well with the music.
Sounds like we better make sure that the room's big enough. I'm a little worried right now.
No,
this sounds like a pretty fun time.
We have 2 international ballrooms back to back for this, so we're very excited. How many is it per song, or is like you switch it up? You just take a few albums and then put on a song each, or how do you mix it up?
You know, I had a fun one. Well, one of the things that's fun is people do kind of want to know the nuts and the bolts of the book, which I like to share by basically, you know, I did an event at a bookstore in Charlotte, which was tough because they couldn't serve alcohol, which always leaves me like,
then it's just
and
vinyl.
I'm sorry, you're all gonna have to run out the door and pick up a drink right after I talk.
Right.
But you know, I took everyone through 3 selections, and the choices that went into them as in terms of the pairing, which was fun. You know, for instance, I can talk about like the Supremes. For them, it came out in I think 63 or 64. There was already a famous bar in Detroit at that time that everyone who was a musician would have had a drink at, called the Wonder Bar. There's a guy named I think Bobby Schifrin who owned it, and there I found his cocktail menu, and he had a famous drink that everyone would have had. So in that instance, I'm taking everyone back in time to a cocktail that people would have been drinking in Detroit when the Supremes came out. Really fun, kind of like Scooby-Dooby-Doo moment, right? You know, taking everybody back. And then I go through a couple of the other selections. One was going through actually what an artist themselves drank and talking about seeing that on tour and how that progressed. And then also just like fun puns. Or fun, you know, this book, I couldn't help myself. There's a Ventura Boulevardier for Tom Petty for his song Free Falling, right? Going down Ventura Boulevard, you know, silly stuff like that, but not so silly because the pairing kind of works because I make it Southern Californian, and also just fun, and everybody loves a pun. So just talking about how the book's functioning on a bunch of different levels, there's a ton of research in it. Right. But then it's also just like meant to be fun and sort of educational at the same time. And you know, people really pick out the small little details, which I write the book thinking, you know, I don't know everything about all these albums when I start, and I sort of get a master's degree in the albums that, you know, are in the book, and I always go by the assumption that if I'm like, wow, that's incredible, I never knew that, other people will think that too, you know. So like for instance in this one, I talk quite a bit about Dick Dale. I have his Surfers Rock in there. I never knew that he, you know, had sort of North African heritage, and that is where the drum beat came from his uncles that would play sort of, I think he was Lebanese or Tunisian background. And I'm like, that's where surf rock comes from? I know a lot about music. I never knew that. So, you know, I bring a lot, you know, I'll play some of these selections and talk about some really just cool things. So everybody leaves, you know, everybody likes to come and see a book talk and leave a little bit smarter. And then the next cocktail party, you can blow someone's mind.
Right.
Like, did you know that Dick Dale was Lebanese?
Right. Well, it's great because we're going straight from your mixology session into the evening entertainment, which is either the movie screening or it's the pool party where there's going to be more booze. And so that'll be a chance for people to quiz each other and talk about it. And, you know, so it'll be fun. I do want to ask you, this is something that we talked about on the phone. And I'm not asking it to dig. I'm actually asking it because I love this, is that you have a really wonderful relationship with Crosley.
Yeah.
And while in the audiophiled asterisk, small print at the bottom, world, Crosley is not the number one default thought of record player and turntable maker. Crosley supports a lot of independent artists. They have a tremendous artist program, an alignment program. I know that they're very community minded. So I'd love to have you give a shout out to Crosley and talk to us a little bit about what that experience has been like and why a Crosley, while it is a more basic rig, is a perfectly fine entry point for people that are looking to get into vinyl, who want to dip their toe in the water, you know?
Yeah, hugely grateful to Crosley. I reached out to a lot of people. The book came out just before Record Store Day in 2018. Of course, at that time, nobody knew, you know, who we were, especially in the music space. Just kind of making it up, putting this book out there. I contacted a lot of people, and Crosley was like, we have this mobile listening van. Do you want to go to some stores with us in a mobile listening van? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it. So we went in a mobile listening van. They showed up at a show out on the East Coast, and we went from New York City to Nashville and stopped at all the places in between, and we hit bars and restaurants that I knew, and we hit stores that Crosley knew, basically. And so we would roll up, and it was really fun because it was like rolling up the circus. Because if you come in a mobile listening store van, people are just like, "What are you even talking about?" So it's like the circus coming to town. We'd show up at a record store, and then really later in the evening we'd go to a bar or restaurant where they would be making drinks from the book, and they'd have this record store outside, and it was just like blowing people's minds. And there's the thing about the hi-fi, and I'm like, listen, Crosley puts millions of turntables into people's hands every year. People have to start somewhere. They're $100. And, they don't have to be your forever turntable, but they're a lot of people's first turntable. And I love it because it's like, people got to get started somewhere. And it's like, you can buy this little turntable and 3 albums. You could give that as a gift to your kid as a graduation present, or to your friend who got rid of their turntable and doesn't have one anymore.
Right.
And it's something, it's like the guys that are drinking Pappy Van Winkle. It's like, you have to remember that before Pappy Van Winkle, you got drunk on a hill with Southern Comfort. Right? Just recall what it was like when you were young and you had no money. So this is the thing with the Crosley turntable. It's like, yes. And also, I have to say that I've had so many older folks come to me especially when I was on the van with them, and say, you know what? When vinyl was new in the late 50s and I was buying Beatles albums, our turntables didn't sound any better. We'd pull those from under our bed and stick it on this turntable, And I have to say, I do tell people, like, listen to the Beatles on it. Listen to singer-songwriter on there. They sound pretty great because those recording engineers knew that it was going to be played on little suitcase turntables to thousands of kids back in the day. And it is fun. I do like to play the Beatles. Modern music with too much bass, you're not going to get, it's not going to sound great on a Crosley sometimes, or any of the brands, because there's so many of the little suitcase brands now. But they really are a great instant access for people. You can take them to a hotel room. I take them going on I take it to go on a picnic or something,
Right.
Just super fun. But yeah, super shout out to Crosley. They've been really generous this time. The mobile record store van, we were too worried with COVID, even in our sort of in our rear view mirror. We're like, we're not bringing people onto a van. But they've been really generous and, are giving away turntables at all my stops on this tour.
Nice.
And it's been really fun. I go into an Urban Outfitters and there is this thing there's a wall of vinyl now, and there are Crosley turntables for sale and my 2 books. Other music books too, but it's really kind of fun. It's like, you could come in this store and then just hit a liquor store afterwards, and you got your whole afternoon for like under $200.
That's the soundbite for the rest of the year. You could come into this store and hit a liquor store, and you got the rest of the afternoon. Exactly. André Darlington, acclaimed author of Booze and Vinyl. I love that.
What a good experience. As you guys know, hi-fi is a continuum, right? Because if you're into hi-fi, you can never have the perfect system. That's part of the genius of hi-fi, is it's never-ending quest for perfect fidelity. But then, at the other end of the spectrum, you have to get on the ladder somewhere. So,
what do you think? Being that as the VP for the show, I would hope that this doesn't happen, but I can almost guarantee you that you will at least encounter one crotchety person who has something less than helpful or productive to say. It happens. Okay.
Oh, for sure.
But I would love to know your message because we do have a lot of young people. We've got students that watch. We've got kids that are in like their sophomore and junior and senior year of music production in college, and even some older high schoolers. Hi-fi, because they are exposed to, you're right, to the Urban Outfitters. Hi-fi is a lifestyle. Here's my mug. Here's my sticker. Here's my patch for my jacket. But in terms of the actual fidelity, what are the next steps? So they get a Crosley turntable. They grab your book. They're not old enough to drink, so they make the mocktail version. Then what? What's their next step in your mind that you would love to see them take so that they can enter further into the hobby of hi-fi?
Well, I guess, ultimately, right, you end up in the separate component world, which is the scary stuff. When the true addiction begins. Although, you know, I'm sitting at home with one of those fairly inexpensive Cambridge audio receivers, and it's pretty fantastic. So I always tell people, you know, this day and age, you can go onto a web.
Uh-oh, looks like we're losing him.
Did we lose him?
Are you there, Emiko?
I'm here.
Okay, I'm here.
There's Andre. We just lost you for a second.
Right. Yeah, that was strange. I think heading in a separate component world, the joyous thing is that, you know, it is kind of a continuum, and you constantly can upgrade for the rest of your life. You know, I've moved a lot, so I've gone through a lot of hi-fi systems just from moving and churn, but that's kind of the fun in a way too. So I think, I mean, my message basically is begin the addiction. The addiction's okay in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, begin the hi-fi habit. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with coveting those, you know, expensive things. And then one day you may have them, or day you may decide that you don't need to go that far, or whatever. You know, but it is a fun ride. I mean, I was lucky enough that when I came out of college, basically a lot of people were dumping their hi-fi systems that were perfectly fine. And we were able to go to secondhand stores and pick up some pretty incredible stuff. That stuff is now a little more expensive. You know, there was the eBay heyday sort of over as well, but I think there's still a lot of good, you know, equipment out there for people. And it's fun to mix and match. And it's really the same with cocktails. It's always, you know, get a few bottles, then get more, then get better ones. So the answer in this,
so many parallels.
Yes, there are
parallels, and they'll be fun to draw as we draw them more. But yeah, I mean, you know, I've gotten pretty serious because, you know, I write these books, so I sort of consider it, you know, research dollars. You know, so I've got to, you know, rocking some, you know, techniques and whatnot. Turntables.
Well, you're on your second book just launched now, right?
Yeah.
Your second book just launched. Have you started thinking about your third book yet, and what might be coming?
We have thought about the third book. I don't know that I wanted to do a Booze and Vinyl 3 right away. It was sort of like, I mean, so they came to me. I mean, it was funny on the first tour. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is so great. When's the second one coming?" And I was like, "It'll never happen. The market decides that. It's amazing this book ever got made." And then I was actually working on a different project, and I had pitched a few things. And my editor, you know, we're actually in the photo studio for another book, and my editor was like, "Actually, all we really want is a Booze and Vinyl 2." And I was like, "Oh, well, that is completely doable." You know, and it was really fun. And the decision was made to roll it really down the middle. People loved one. There was so much more music. We changed up a few things. We changed up the moods a little bit. I think we cast the net a little broader on the music. We certainly got some albums. I mean, it's incredible how many hits we left on the cutting room floor to have so many hits still in 2. You know, we definitely wanted to make it appealing. But a little bit wider net. And also, I don't know, 2 just came out, you know, you can see the cover of 2. It's like in color and juicier. So it's a fun second volume follow-up, but very similar to 1. I think 3, we're leaning towards a holiday album, or a holiday book, a smaller book, gifty, focusing on the holidays, and that's appealing to me as a cocktailer because it can be a winter holidays cocktail book with the added inclusion of all these, but the story told through the music. And I think it'll be everything again from sort of the 40s when Christmas music really boomed up until modern times. So, and then after that, we'll see. There may be a third. You know, it just depends on what happens. But you know. There's been a bunch of ideas tossed around.
I think your life has been, or it sounds like it's so fun. You need Booze and Vinyl, the documentary. Like, this needs to be documented and like shown how fun this lifestyle is.
Maybe a show.
Or a show.
Yeah.
Or a show. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, if I could bring on some musicians and make some drinks.
Right.
Kind of like at Daryl's house or whatever, but with
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, as a matter of fact, that's a good Brian, that's a good point, because I just realized we're going to be filming my production company did a documentary short about HiFi, and we've now been commissioned to do the feature film, and we're going to be filming at the show.
Oh, great.
And you will be there. Would you like to be in the documentary with your book? Yeah, exactly. Well, there's going to be signs all over that say, by entering, you are entering a place that's, where by default, we're filming you, I think. So
it kind of happens when you land at LAX, really.
Basically, yes.
Surveillance everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may end up on this movie.
You never know.
No, that's fun. That's really fun.
Okay. No, that would be great, because then I would love to be able to interview you and talk about why this is an important component of making HiFi come to life. And I tell you, I was really surprised. I still am surprised at how beautifully and how articulately you've drawn out I keep going back to the social aspect, and maybe that's because I'm not as great with people as people think I am, because I like to listen to music alone. I do drink alone occasionally as well. But
I'm drinking with you on Slipstream, so
yes.
It's not the same, right?
Right. No. But the way that you've so gently drawn out how important the social aspect is, and the almost the familial aspect of vinyl, and sharing a drink, right? Not just, get drunk and, down them left and right, but this idea of this is something that you want to do with someone, do for someone.
Yeah.
There's an exchange there, which is really, again, such a deeply and very basic human trait that I think you've covered so beautifully. There's no question. I just wanted to tell you that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that it's wonderful that you picked up on it. I mean, I feel like the books, well, in a way, alcohol, right, is sort of gets us out of our at its best, right, can get us out of our loneliness and bring out great conversations.
Sure.
I think that's why people go to bars and drink together. It breaks this barrier. And I'm very conscious in the book of, how do you break the seal of anxiety on, sharing an experience with people, which is why I'm really keen to be, all you need is 3 bottles. All you need, if you look in the appendix, it's like, you just need some really simple things. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. And you can just have people over to do this. And again, if the book is some kind of excuse for people to come together and talk about, music or just their lives, or just enjoy an artistic experience together, that's really the whole entire point, is just sharing sharing the passion for this incredible art and good drinks, which is not about getting drunk. It's about having an experience and learning something. I mean, you have a good time, but it's also like, oh, this is great. We had a good time, but we learned something. So that makes the good time even better, because it makes it this really positive experience.
Well, it's very much like wine tasting, I think, for those of us that take that to the next. And I know you have an affinity or an affiliation with is it with Napa, with Napa Valley?
Yeah, I mean,
I was reading about that.
Started this whole crazy road because I was a wine writer and I had a wine column, and then I won the Napa Valley Vintner Association Fellowship, which was kind of a nuts experience, just an incredible experience. But it's exactly like that, right? It's wine appreciation. I mean, you can go down the street and get a really cheap screw cap of wine and chug it. Or, you can sort of get like 4 bottles with your friends and go home and, sort of blind taste them together and start opening up maps of the world and looking at it. And I guess booze and vinyl is a little bit more the latter, right? You're drinking, you're listening to music, but it's a little bit nerdy. You're going to learn a little bit about the albums. You're going to learn how the album sits in relationship to other albums of its era or why it's important. And so that little bit of a nerdy aspect, it gives you something to do. I mean, my favorite thing is when I go onto Instagram and a couple or 2 friends are sort of going through the book. And, it's great because they're like, I don't like this music. I don't love this drink. Next one. And but then the next one is like, wow, this blew my mind. So like each page that they're doing on Instagram is this like really like heavy reaction of like love or like, not for me. But that is the whole point, right? But they listened to it, and now they know that album, or now they know that liquor that they didn't try before. you know, life isn't all hits, but if you've learned 5 more liquors and 10 more albums that you love, man, your life is expanded.
I dig it. And on that note, we say to you, André Darlington, thank you so much for being our special guest tonight on the Talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are very excited, and I have been virtually gaining weight following your Instagram stories of your breakfast hauls and your brunches and all of the creamy sauce covered eggs and dishes and everything. And I'm just going, oh, I can't.
Yeah, tour is tough. I'm at home now, and I'm basically exercising every day before I go back on the road.
Right.
So I can post more Instagram pictures of eating too much on tour.
Yep, I hear you. Well, everybody, Booze and Vinyl Volume 1 and Volume 2 are available everywhere. We are going to have them for sale at the show. Andre, will you be able to sign any of the books if anybody wants?
I will sign every one of the books.
Excellent. Because we are going to have more Volume 2 on hand, because that's the one that we want to push and support. I mean, we support Volume 1 because I have it, but we're going to have more Volume 2. So if you're looking for Volume 1, get them
now, you know.
Yep, get them quickly. Don't wait. But we will have them on hand at the show, June 10th through 12th at the Hilton Long Beach, Southern California. The Headphonium, which is presented by our wonderful media partner eCoustics this year, and Brian Mitchell and his whole crew are going to be there. Just
excited to be there. Can't wait to see everybody in about 2 weeks. It's crazy.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me. 2 weeks.
We're both in person. We'll have to chink a cocktail toast.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very pleased to say that we have 180 exhibitors this year.
Amazing.
Or this June. So for anybody that's wondering about that, I know we've been
glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. 180 exhibitors. The full exhibitor list will be posted. Get your tickets. The Eventbrite link is on our website, thehomeentertainmentshow.com. And Andre, again, thank you so very, very much for your time. We're so excited to see you.
Fantastic.
And everybody, make sure to be there Friday and Saturday. We've got you at 5 o'clock for your mixology talk and session.
All right.
So thank you everybody so much for watching, and we will see you very soon.
See you in LA.